Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and thanks for stopping by. Our dedicated team will guide you through with the latest updates and theories at Starbase, Texas. If you're new to the channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell icon for future streams.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, Starbase friends around the world. Astro Joe here for RGV Aerial Photography, Starbase Weekly, episode number 114. Got a great show for you today. Sorry we're a day late, but we got fresh pictures to go over from yesterday. I'll pass it on over to your host, Stephanie.
G'day from Australia. My name's Stephanie B. Welcome to another flyover live stream. We've got a couple of guest commentators today, and first we have the award-winning Ryan Hansen from Ryan Hansen Space. G'day.
Good afternoon, everybody. We've got a lot of cool pictures to look at. There's a lot of cool projects that SpaceX is working on, so we'll go ahead and see a lot of those here today and be able to speculate on a lot of different changes that we're seeing throughout the sites.
Okay, and we've got a first-time commentator in Darth Lawrence. I think a fair few people in the community chat with Darth Lawrence on a different live stream, so g'day, Darth.
Thank you, Steph, and thank you, Ryan, and thank you, RGV, for having me on the stream today.
And without further ado, we'll jump over to Macy's. Okay, we'll start first at the trench again, and this week we see quite a lot more advancement in the trench. The main thing obviously is they've buried the large plumbing for the water deluge system, and there's concreting going on, so the 4 back supports would be in there, and the concrete is more than likely going into the actual big steel supports in there that were they had Nelson studs and so have in there to receive concrete. And the go on.
I was just going to say, they also, it looks like
Yeah, I think they're the bits I think I'm talking about that get filled with concrete. So the flame bucket itself still hasn't been put in trench yet. And a major change, obviously, is the QD frame has been put up. So the ship quick disconnect is in here. And also, it's worth noting that quite a lot of the plumbing is already coming down the legs and over onto the stands, with just the main fluids, by the look of it, still to be plumbed in. So that's quite a big advancement as well. And while we're in here, we can see they've installed those massive rails here, which would be for that platform to roll on. So when they roll the SBMTs over the flame trench here, that platform will be over the hole, and then of course retracted, ready for the static fire.
Does not look like they have the rails extended into the opening yet, but there are some exposed plates there for them to, I assume, weld to once they get that in place. Not sure if there's some longer brown looking objects here to the right. I'm not sure if those are just pieces of wood kind of up to the top right hand corner, or if those are additional rails by that orange generator in the right corner. Yeah, I'm not sure if those are rails or just some additional, boards or anything they've got laying around. But yeah, it looks like the rail system is going in. Presumably only two rails. I don't think they're going to put anything in the middle. But guess we'll have to wait and see if they, have anything that they'll put right there, just while it's resting off to the side.
We noticed inlays in that concrete that still haven't been used yet. It's be interesting to see what they do with that. With those, I mean, just while we're in this little area, so the plumbing from the tank farm is been installed on those racks as well, with an interesting little deviation here. That could be for expansion joints, but that's different to every other expansion joint, where mostly they end with a flange, and then the actual expansion joint has the top elbows as well. So it could be a different sort of expansion joint here, or it could be some more kind of GSE equipment sitting here of some description. And it seems to only be on the liquid oxygen and the liquid methane lines. Moving on, I think that's all for that flame trench. They're doing more work on the ramp, and I guess in the future, we will see another retainer wall on this side. It seems odd that they haven't already put it in, but I guess it's not one of their high priorities just at this minute.
I have a feeling they'll build up the grade kind of where that crane is, and kind of have access to both sides, because if they put that stand on top of the trench, one side is going to be blocked by the horizontal beams that kind of connect the legs of the stand. So I think that right side would be the one that potentially they roll like a vehicle up onto with a lift in order to get up into the skirt of the ships. So I think they may build that grade up, but it's not a priority right now, so they'll probably handle that later.
Yep, that'd be the to do some maintenance underneath. Do some maintenance underneath the ship. Okay, moving on to the deluge farm. My doggy's being noisy. They've added this last piece of pipe work over to the end of the heat exchangers here, and it still looks like there's room for a fifth heat exchanger in here. And there's also room to put another. They could extend this and put a T in here if they wanted to put a fifth heat exchange in. The other main visible change is they put some vents on the top of the tanks. So I'm guessing they're going to be the blow-off vents that we notice at the launch site when they finish doing a water deluge run. They release the gases in the tanks through the blow-off valves. And again, we still believe that this is where the gas is going to go into the tanks. So in case people missed it, the current working theory. The current working theory is the liquid nitrogen will be pumped into these heat exchangers, and then the high pressure nitrogen will come down this larger line and then across into these three lines here that will go up and put the high pressure nitrogen into the top of the tanks there. The water from this first tank here will travel from the outlet exclusively through this pipe and through the heat exchangers and then back out into the manifold. My doggies are being cute. Okay, and this system here, we're still not sure about it. It could have something to do with starting the system. It was suggested in show and tell they might not need something to start the system. Just gravity may be enough to force water through the heat exchange system to actually start the gasification of the nitrogen in here. If that gravity is not quite enough, perhaps this system, at least this tank, is to pressurize this tank just to get the system actually up and running. Once water's flowing through here, it'll continue by itself, I should imagine. And going on all this work, and especially because of how quickly they're going at the launch site as well, this whole system is looking very close to being almost complete. There seems to be only little bits of plumbing here and there. Like most of all, the majority of the big work's been done. But as you know, whenever you do a project, the finer details can sometimes take longer than the larger items. So there's a lot of fiddling around with fitting off fittings or electrical fittings here and there, little electrical boxes, and lots of little tiny bits of fitting up here and there to do still.
While I was watching the pieces put into the trench, I was noticing as we're about to move on that there have been a lot of venting going on over in that area near the methane side of the tank farm. And it looked like it started slowly moving from the original section of the tank farm over to the methane side as it progressed throughout the week.
Which would be an indication that they're purging the system here and there. And then now we finally have some methane deliveries as well now. So the actual storage part of this methane farm is up and running, and its associated safety equipment, which is necessary when you have a live cryo fluid, especially a highly flammable cryo fluid like methane. Still a couple of little bits and pieces of plumbing here to go. And if we look at a render here by Chrome Kiwi, looking at the bottom of the trench, and this is similar to the way McGregor is with the two different pipes. And this is sort of how it's going to end up being, the plumbing coming along the bottom of the trench and going into the various pieces. With permission from Starship Gazer, we can see, and make sure you give him a follow, we can see these buckets have the T-piece built into them, and only one of them has that. We can see that in this photo here. This piece doesn't have a T-piece, which will be the near side, and this piece does have the T-piece. This is the piece we saw just then on the truck there, with the T-piece down there, with the water inlet there. So we go back to Kiwi's render. The near side one, I'm going to set that backwards then. The near side one has the T-piece, and then there'll be that section sitting over on the ground here to join the two pieces together, the two outside buckets together, and maybe a little bit of various elbows and so on to actually finish this part of the trench down here. Thank you, Chrome Kiwi, for that. And that's basically how it looks now. Okay, moving along. We saw cabling here over the past few weeks, and now that's all disappeared, so that pretty well means the electrical bunker's been fitted out, and that would have been necessary before they could bring in live methane as well. And the rolling platform's been moved. Now, I don't think these concrete trucks have anything to do with that platform. Those concrete trucks all for this concrete pump here at this stage. But later on, we do believe that this will be filled with concrete with extra rebar on each side where the SPMTs will actually roll. So this will be the side facing Highway 4 here, over this end, and then the guardrail at the back, which will allow room for the SPMTs to go further under so they can actually fit the stand. I guess one more thing to note about the stand, the static fire flame trencher, these pedestals on each corner for the static fire stand to be able to rest it down and get the SPMTs out from underneath.
Follows the same pattern that we see with like the cryo station, where they have those like permanently installed pedestals that they lower the stand down onto. So we were theorizing we'd see the same thing with this stand, and looks like that's what they're doing.
Yeah, and that's why we're on the stand, and they have temporary stands under here, so there's room for the SPMTs to roll under these horizontal bars here. And we might take a quick look at that stand while we're here. We can see on top it's quite a lot different to the static fire stand at Pad B at the orbital launch site, where at the launch site they've only got these flat pieces of steel actually where the clamps are, whereas on this stand they've got the bits in between as well, which, Ryan, you were speculating the reason for that.
Yeah, so a lot of the newer transport stands, they have these additional kind of circular pieces that go around the edge, and I believe they mainly do that just to kind of distribute the load of the vehicle on the stand. It probably adds a little bit of stability as well as, when they're driving down the highway. But yeah, these essentially fit up into, there's like a groove between the booster and the ship, and this is essentially mimicking that same groove. They've done this for a while. I believe as far back as stands that were used for like Ship 20. They had a couple stands that were configured this way, so it's not surprising to see that same sort of method being used on this stand.
And that that method was used here on this cryo stand as well. We'll have a quick look at that when we get to Sanchez. And do you think that has something to do with them being able to fill the ships up completely?
It's possible. We've seen them, use the stands that have those when doing cryo tests. Pretty much since the cryo portion of testing moved away from the launch site, so it's possible that it's kind of an additional way to distribute that mass from all the fuel. There's going to be a lot of forces on the bottom of the ship, so it's probably just a way to make it a little bit more similar to the conditions that it will have while it's on top of the booster in flight as well, kind of to distribute evenly across the surface.
Thank you. I think to finish off the flame trench system altogether, we noticed a lack of plumbing, cryo plumbing and whatnot. So most of that has been installed. We do have some new walkways here. We're unsure where they're going to go. I mean, one theory doesn't quite fit. They could be, there's 4 of them and there's 4 legs to this stand. So they may have something to do with the stand. We can see extra supports here. I'm not sure that's what they're going to be. But we'll have to wait on that one. We spent way too much time trying to work out where these went yesterday, and we couldn't quite work it out. We did notice a few things like a little angle piece at the ends here, and we noticed that the angles were asymmetric.
Yeah, you can tell a little bit better from the side shots, but yeah, the angle doesn't really look like it's symmetrical, which kind of goes against the idea that they'd be used for around the top part above the legs, just because that looks like it's be symmetric. I'm not sure why they wouldn't make them symmetric, but yeah, it is a little interesting to see those pieces like that.
Okay, let's move on to the new test rig. Excuse me. So we'll start with the main frame. The lower level. So we're going to talk about levels here. The lower level has been completed, and we have a new stand next to the stand. I guess that'll be something to do with perhaps GSC equipment, because we do have new GSC lines heading towards this stand. So there's a good chance this will have cryo capabilities, or at least pressurized nitrogen. Talking about levels, now we have another level of legs here to be added to the top of these legs. And if we look closely, we can see, I might have a better image, we can see lead-ins on the top of the new level, so it's going to go higher again.
We can also see the lead-ins on the current level that's installed. That kind of gives us here's a nice shadow. You can see the back too. So that gives us a good indication that they're going to throw on a second level, and then something is going to attach to form a third level, whether it's a full ring, because we can see the curved pieces above this, which will form the circular ring for the second level. But it doesn't appear that there's any parts currently laying around which would make up the third level, if it's a full level or just a post that sticks up on top of this. We're not quite sure yet.
Yeah, and just on that top ring, because there's these, they put these down, and it seems to be the right size circle to go on top. It seems to be the same size circle as this. So perhaps we're going to see another. So there's the circular parts we're talking about to go in between these higher legs to create a second level up here. And then, perhaps a great big circle to go up on top, because they're going to need something up top for a circle to attach the actuators that are going to attach to this ring, to the top cap. And it looks like they're going to have multiple ways of doing it between these three angled systems here and these newer additions down here. There's 5 of them around. So it looks like they're going to be able to push and pull this top cap around in all of the different directions, including the crushing action, of course, with perhaps the rope still.
Yeah, we speculated about this in show and tell last night, that this is kind of like a flexible test stand, that it can do several different things, which would require slightly different configurations between different tests. But it can crush evenly or asymmetrically. They can also add some torsion to it, or we're kind of speculating with the parts there that Stephanie is highlighting. There's 3 sections that seem to have kind of opposing actuation connections, so potentially some sort of twisting they can also do. So very similar to what they kind of did on the nose cone jail. So it's possible that this structure is able to kind of take over what the nose cone jail did, but we'll have to wait and see, I guess, how this structure progresses, if it's a replacement or just a second one for maybe a slightly different task or type of vehicle testing.
And this week the ring, I think it was finished last week. It's been set up on stands here, which is different from last week. So we can see the 20 as the old Crane Crusher had the 20 rams with the ropes, the straps. We can see the base for the 20 vertical actuators here. So there's a really good chance that ring is going to sit down probably on top of this. And we're still speculating that these rams may be installed in the center to do some puck shucking. And looking at the length of those rams, we imagine this ring would have to be elevated slightly in here to allow room for the actuators to fit underneath the booster. Because unlike the ship with its skirt, the booster's puck shuck is quite close to the bottom of the booster. So there needs to be some kind of clearance in here to put these puck shucking rams in. A comment made about a question was asked in show and tell whether there's a need for the puck shucking rams in this test rig when they've already got the puck shucking rams in the booster puck shucking transport stand. And a simple answer to that would be that this is for testing new articles, whereas these puck shucking stands are more for testing that the actual airframe has been welded together properly and constructed properly, rather than testing new engineering.
Yeah, they may want to provide forces, I guess, at the top of, say they build like a shorter booster test article. They may want to introduce forces at the top and the bottom to kind of squish the middle of it to see how that affects it. So, putting rams in the middle of this one is definitely a possibility. It wouldn't necessarily, negate the other test stand. That other stand would still provide, a different sort of testing.
Okay, I think to round out Macy's, we've noticed the generators have been removed from the site, and through the week, crews were noticed working on at the entrance of Macy's Road to Highway 4. They were working on the power lines, possibly to connect the newly installed underground power supply. So there's a very good chance Macy's is running on the new three-phase mains, possibly into this area. And even with a couple of redundancies between the Tesla packs on this generator here, because they now have live cryo fluids and especially methane, the safety systems here aren't allowed to be turned off. So they need 100% reliable power. So I guess that's why there's some redundancy down in here, just to make sure. I think that's covered most of Macy's. We'll have some questions and donations, please, Joe.
Sure thing. Want to thank Jap Kuipers for gifting a membership before the stream started. Thanks, Sharpie, for a $9.99 super chat. Choo choo, keep RGV flying and snapping photos. Rocket Profit with a $10 super chat. Awesome photos as always. Choo choo. Got a question from Kelly McElrath. During show and tell last night, they didn't know what the high pressure cylinders and small tank at Massey's is for. Could it be for a priming system for the deluge system, possibly?
Yeah, that's sort of what I speculated earlier. Yes. I mean, to start this system, another idea was just gravity was going to be enough to allow water to start flowing through this pipe. But perhaps I need a bit more pressure to actually start the system off. Because once the nitrogen starts to flow, the system should run by itself. Yeah, that's my guess, that it's something to do with the priming, but just not sure yet.
All right. Respect asking, will the end of the flame trench have a roof?
No, I think if you consider one of the things we look at a lot is the Falcon 9 flame trench at McGregor's, and it doesn't have a roof. It has the flame trench at McGregor has a similar platform on this side of the trench, but nothing covering this side of the trench. I mean, it needs to be open exit. I guess they mean a roof up higher, or maybe somehow to block. There's always been the speculation what happens to Mexico and how are they going to handle how's Mexico going to go with the flames shooting over to the side here? I mean, there shouldn't be a lot of exhaust make it over the river, I wouldn't think. But no, I don't think it'll have a roof. I guess with rainfall, if that's the issue they're worrying about, I guess it'll have sump pumps down in the bottom.
Yeah, the platform that we see there, I think, is mainly for two reasons. One, they need a sliding platform to actually cover the hole while they put the ships on top. But then also it protects kind of the underside of the QD, because at this point the tiles are facing away from Mexico, which is what I was always imagining. That way they don't have the acoustic energy, knocking against those tiles. But that far end, it needs to really be as open as possible so the energy can get dissipated. They need to be able to get the steam out of there. So with this being underground the way that it is, a lot of the steam is going to go kind of upwards at like a 45-degree angle. So imagining that it's going to be fairly hot as well, it'll probably go not mostly up, but it's not going to go straight across the river like you'd see when they do testing at like the suborbital site. So the plume is going to go quite a bit up. I don't think it would actually even touch the ground on the other side of the river, to be honest, depending on how warm it is. With all that heat being generated, it's going to lift the steam up a little bit more than you might think.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And if people want to look at a good simulation of what the steam may look like, I would always refer to the RS-25 stand at Stennis, where it's basically going to be water vapor coming out more than anything.
Yeah, you're not going to see any flames probably from exiting the trench. It's gonna be just a bunch of water, if I had to guess.
All right. Hal 9000 asking, how will they secure the ship stand to the ground during static fires?
We actually speculated about that last night as well. There's basically two thoughts to this. They could bolt the stand to those pedestals, like that they've done in other places previously. Um, the pedestals do look kind of small to really have a lot of access for bolting them down. So the other thought is that they have filled the stand with concrete, and they're just going to rely on the ballast weight of the ship in the stand to kind of hold this down, because they don't static fire these vehicles at full throttle. I don't think they ever have, or they may never. We'll just have to see, if SpaceX tweets and tells us, how much thrust was generated. But there's kind of an idea that they don't necessarily need to bolt them down. There may just be enough mass to keep them on the ground with the thrust to weight ratio that they have.
Sounds good. Missing Tools asking, any evidence of the missing Massey's LOX tank being shipped?
I guess referring to this tank, I'm not sure it's LOX or methane, LOX or nitrogen. It could possibly be LOX. And no, I don't think there has been any talk in the chats about that tank yet.
Right. Kanan Copeland asking, if they are doing a flame trench here, why not at the OLM and go through the hassle of making a deluge plate?
If I could answer that, a flame trench requires a lot of refurbishment after fires when you're talking about vehicles like SLS, Space Shuttle, or 33 Raptor engines versus 6 to 9 Raptor engines.
I'd agree with that. I think there's kind of a thought that they can just apply the flame trench concept to Starship and Super Heavy. I don't think that's exactly applicable from the standpoint that I think the largest vehicle really to use a flame trench, or a U.S. vehicle, was a Saturn V. And if you've looked at the Russian N1 rocket, you'll know that it actually used 3 exits to its flame trench. I think Starship being, as powerful as it is, would require a multi-sided flame trench. And at that point, you're digging and you're doing a multiple of the amount of work, depending on how many exits you've got. Plus, they don't really have the available footprint to be digging, a star pattern. If you imagine this flame trench but multiplied by 6, they don't really have the space to do that at the launch site. And the SpaceX is really trying to disperse the energy as much as they can. They don't really want to confine it, and that's kind of what a flame trench is essentially doing. Is confining a lot of that energy. Now they're able to throw a lot of water at it, and try and mitigate a lot of the acoustic energy, but you still have a lot of energy that is being confined in a small, relatively small space, and I don't think that really works very well when you get up to something like Super Heavy. And another aspect of that is Super Heavy's engine density is so high, they can't really have an angled deflector, um, to kind of push in various directions, because there would be essentially a sharp edge that would be exposed to the plume that will wear away over time, and could cause debris to get thrown around. So they can't really, they would essentially have to have a large one-sided ramp like the original concept that they started building at 39A. But I don't think that's something that they really want to do. I think they kind of like the plate system because it's able to disperse the energy, in a relatively, minimal, uh, design, I guess you could say. It doesn't require digging down and doing everything that they've been doing, that we've observed them doing for this single sided flame trench.
Yeah, I would add that since we've seen it in use for 2 flights and multiple static fires, there really has not been much work done on the deluge system versus the rest of the OLM and pad.
We'll have to see if they, keep the plate design. I'm sure they've learned optimizations because, they're changing things all throughout the site with, different lessons that they've learned. And I know we'll probably get into some of those things on the OLM later. But they're still learning. I think proof of concept definitely works. So I think they're going to continue to use a very similar system for the next couple launch pads.
Sounds good. Thanks, Miss Jax, for gifting a membership. Whenever has a question, has there been any sign on any paperwork in relation to Massey's test fires recently?
I guess that's in relation to static firing over Mexico. I don't believe so. I still haven't heard anything in chats regarding that either.
The last PEA I found for Massey's was done in 2020 for AT&T, but I have not seen anything recent.
Interesting. All right, Crane Man has a question. Do you have pictures from Brownsville Harbor tower sections for this episode?
Yes, we do. We'll cover that at Sanchez. Thank you, Crane Man.
All right. And final question related to this portion of the show. James Howard asking, are there signs of what vertical and horizontal tanks SpaceX is going to use for Flight 4? Oh, sorry, that's more launch site related, but that's the last question I've got in my queue.
We'll get to that at the launch site. Thank you very much. Okay, I think we covered Sanchez enough. Macy's enough. Let's go over to Sanchez. Okay, starting off at the GSC end, as usual, the tent that never got built got removed. It's interesting. We have some more concrete at the edge here. I guess that's just to finish off the edge of Macy's there. And once again, a lack of cryogenic plumbing indicates that a lot of the plumbing that has been recently fabricated here at this ground fabrication building has been fabricated and mostly installed. We'll get to that. We'll get more of that on the launch site, but also at Macy's, we've noticed, as we just saw, most of the plumbing is in place there at Macy's as well. So I guess the next job for this building will be the launch tower plumbing, we'll get to that in a minute. Going on to the stands, not much again has happened with the transport stands, if anything at all. And the same with the ship's engine stands platforms. They haven't changed at all. So not sure what's going on with those two. We do notice that the cap, we think they're caps for the boosters. That one's finished off. And we've got a new mystery structure. This new mystery structure is 10 segments. It has larger radial pieces and smaller radial pieces. So it looks like it's going to have 2 circles with an inner stand. So the best speculation we could come up with was being white, would be some kind of rig, something to do with the actual factory.
Interesting thing to note on those kind of beams is that, yeah, there's an angle to the top of them, which actually is in the middle. If you go up to that, yeah, so they kind of slope inward toward the center. So that's kind of an interesting shape to them, and not quite sure what that would indicate. Possibly these are upside down, or maybe they'll be flipped once they're completed. Not entirely sure.
They like giving us mysteries to work out, SpaceX. So we did count, didn't we? We counted 10 of these objects, didn't we? The radius there, there's some more there. Yeah, 10 of these and 10 of them to make 2 different circles. I think we even saw perhaps one of the circles belongs on the very outside and one perhaps where it changes grade.
Yeah, it definitely looks to be an inner and outer circle in between the beams.
We do have a new crane for the crane people. Got raised through the week. We expected to see that over near the garage, to be honest. But anyway, it's over here where there's a lot of room here. Sanchez, it's so much room at the moment. It's really nice to see, considering how crowded this whole area looked only a few months ago.
Yeah, it definitely looks like they're trying to keep it as clean as possible for when they're ready to move the tower segments back over.
So going on the tower section, we have a lot of pipework here, which looks similar to the pipework that goes up the tower at the launch site. So that's possibly being staged, ready for these tower sections to be fitted out, for all the tower sections, sorry.
Is that pipework just raw material? I'm not sure if that's actually been completed. I think that might just be a rack of the raw material as they maybe bring it in. Do we know if there's flanges kind of on the ends of those? Those look like raw materials to me.
Yeah, those look just like the regular standard steel pipes before they add the insulation and flanges.
Although the one, I do think I see some flange and insulation on one of those. So maybe there's a mix there. Maybe one side is raw material and the other one is kind of finished sections. Yeah, the white one's on the left, kind of the back side of that. Those look like they have a flange and some white insulation on them. But yeah, these other ones look like raw material still. So looks like they're gearing up for producing a lot of piping though. So could be an indication of tank farm or tower activity.
No.
Yeah,
Go on.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, we've seen on the back of the GSE building that they have those roller racks where they just seem to come out finished.
Someone was asking before about the port, and here all the aerial work platforms have disappeared. So it looks like they're finished doing the staircase work and whatever work they were doing on those tower sections. And it's still a mystery before people ask. It's still very much a mystery why these aren't at Sanchez presently. There doesn't seem to be any reason. I mean, there's plenty of room here. I guess it's just a very low priority thing at the moment with all the work being carried out at Macy's and the launch site over the last couple of months.
Yeah, and I noticed that there were no more parts for the tower segments laying on the ground in that last shot.
There's a lack of parts. We saw that great big stack of parts always here has disappeared as well. So I think there's still a bit to go on these. They still haven't put the pulleys in, and there's still a roof to put on this section as far as I know.
Yeah, they may be waiting until they get the tower built to put those in, like with the problems they had at 39A and the original tower.
Yeah, it's interesting with the top of the tower there. You can actually see where they will put the pulleys inside the top section there. There's some kind of bright spots. They're kind of at an angle there toward the middle. Actually, no, up in the flooring, you can see there's some bright spots yet right there. So that's actually where the pulleys go, and then there's two holes. You can kind of see the dark spot there. That's actually where the line goes down inside the tower for one side, and then there's kind of a yellow, maybe a plug over the other hole. So, but that's where the wire actually goes down inside the tower.
And one goes to the winch, and the other one goes to the dead block. The dead. What do they call that thing? The dead reel.
Yeah, whichever side they put the drawworks on will kind of dictate which one is used for what. But the yellow plug is, if this was the first tower at Starbase, that would be the drawworks side.
Okay, we'll move on. Not much changed in this area. Last week we noticed these new pipes over here that haven't seemed to have changed. I'll come back to we'll go to the garage now. Why not? We can go around in this order. So the garage is coming along nicely. The cage we saw last week, the rebar we saw last week, has been buried. Seems to be progressing as per normal. I think, were you saying, Ryan, about the construction looks more like it's going to be steel? Steel rather than prefab concrete slabs? That might have been
Yeah,
someone else. Go on.
yeah, those footings definitely remind me of the footings over at the office building with the dog bone shape.
I didn't notice this in Sean. So we're seeing a raised wall here, are we?
Yeah, that kind of looks like the beginning of kind of the sloped ramp that would go up the one side, because it would probably, coil as it goes up the different levels. So they might fill that with dirt. And yeah, I'm not really sure what they would do with that other side. I assume at some point, you get up high enough that you can kind of park under the other side.
Yes, correct, underneath the ramp. So there might be a suspended ramp from here up.
Yep, that would be the thought.
Okay, the only little change I noticed in the scrapyard is they moved the booster cap off the top of the booster forward section here down onto this work platform. And there's a few more Raptors over here. Let's go over this shot. Booster 4. So there's like 15, 16 engines now. So that means still a few engines to go. We've got a shot from the other angle. You can see there's been a bit of traffic in and out of underneath the booster. Looks like they've stopped working on ship 26. So, I mean, wouldn't it be lovely to have one of these engines? I mean, as a showpiece. I'm wondering if they're going to sell them to collectors or just scrap them. I guess there'd be some ITAR issues with giving them to collectors.
Be interesting to see if they could, send a couple to a museum here or there. Granted, they're from Booster 4, so they're not, super valuable, but it'd be nice if, they could use them for, various display pieces, maybe at different offices and whatnot.
And just going back on what I was saying before about the ship stand at Macy's, this puck-shucking cryo stand has the same full circle here rather than just where it mounts. We'll see at the launch site. I'll show again where the test pad B only has these landing parts here where the actual clamps are, whereas these more newer stands have the full circle, so to speak.
Yeah, you can actually see the kind of the pair of light spots. Those are actually kind of the tongue pieces, as I call them, that kind of angled that help align the ship as they lower it down. So the little clamping mechanism, it's like a little tab that actually flips out between those two light spots that actually clamps on the bottom of the ship. So yeah, there'd be 6 of those all the way around. So pretty neat stuff.
Absolutely. And behind the rocket garden here, the work continues here. I'm not sure. I'm guessing it's water or maybe some commodity from the nearby commodities farm. There's a manifold there. It could have something to do with the commodity farm over here, or it could just be water distribution. And we see it coming out over near the factory. We'll see that later on. So it comes into here with some kind of manifold system here, some kind of distribution system here, and continues, one moment, all the way through into this part of the trench, which continues on. I think I've got to go to the build site for the photo. Continues on behind Mega Bay 2.
Did they directionally bore underneath all of that to put those in? Do we know?
We go on, Darth.
They did, and it's also the same type of directional boring they were doing over near where the water processing plant is as well.
Yeah, in the past we saw some horizontal boring. Is it just here? We saw some risers come up here, which I assumed went all the way straight through behind Mega Bay 2 all the way over to the factory, but perhaps it only came to here. So this stuff doesn't seem to continue over in that direction, so maybe this is something completely different again. When they're adding stuff here, they're everywhere. It's a bit hard to keep track. They have had a roll of pipework here staged, so it could have something to do with this system. And in the past few weeks, we've noticed some of this white pipe laying on the ground in lengths has also disappeared. So quite a bit of work going on with whatever that infrastructure is, possibly water. Okay, I think that pretty well covers Sanchez, sorry. There wasn't a lot to cover at Sanchez this week. So unless Ryan or Darth have anything else you want to cover here, we'll go over to Joe for questions.
I've got a single question from Torsten Giedak. Have you seen anything that looks like a second actuator at the ground fab building for the chopsticks?
No, we have not seen a second chopstick actuator. And when we get to the launch site, we can go into that more.
That's a good point. That reminds me too, yeah, obviously the other change we notice here is that actuator's missing because we saw it get installed. And now all 20 linkages are here, which we'll cover more about that when we get to the build site.
All right, moving right along.
Okay, let's go over to the build site then. Okay, framework. I'll start over towards Mega Bay 2. I think in this shot we can see Mega Bay 2. I'll find a better shot. Mega Bay 2 has new engine install stands being put inside this photo here, that photo. There we go. So, which is interesting because it's in the front corner. So we now have front left corner. So we now have 3 engine stands, at least the legs, one in the front left, one in the rear left, and one in the center rear in that side, which differs from the Mega Bay, obviously, with the 3 engine stands at the back. So that was an interesting development in there.
Yeah, I feel like that has something to do with Raptor staging. If I had to guess, they're probably going to build a something kind of off to that side of the Mega Bay to maybe store engines for ships only. So ease of access kind of through that side might be why they're choosing to put the engine stands, I guess, on kind of that half of the building.
Thank you. Okay. And we could see inside this bay a little bit. And we can see a little bit of ship 29. Still see a few tiles missing, but maybe a lot less. We can see they've done the, I didn't notice that before, they've done the weld sections with tiles. By the looks of that, they've still got some tiles missing on the forward flap, and the nose cone looks like it's fully tiled again.
It's good to see them doing work on the flaps because it seemed like during Flight 3, the flaps is where a lot of the tiles actually fell off. I believe during kind of passing through Max Q, you can actually see a couple of them pop off. So I'm sure they're kind of refining their testing method for kind of those tiles. Maybe they're putting a little bit more suction on them to see if they pop off and applying maybe some more glue to them.
Hey, the hot
Yeah,
stage. Go on.
I was just going to say, yeah, it is definitely interesting to see that that blue adhesive has been swapped for the red adhesive. So it does look like they figured out something as far as the tile attachment goes.
We also note, there's some more tiles on the aft flap as well there. We did notice when they took the tiles off the nose cone that they actually buffed or scratched the stainless steel underneath the very top of the nose cone, which you would think, I mean, that's not rocket science, tiling. I mean, obviously it is some kind of rocket science, isn't it? A nice little view here inside the high bay. We can see the turntable. We don't often see that view. Just while we're here, we spoke of the back of we spoke of plumbing coming over from Sanchez. We can see it coming out over here, and similar kind of plumbing with similar kind of fittings going into this building here, which could be water supply to the HVAC units perhaps, or some kind of infrastructure inside the Mega Bay 2.
Yeah, with that office floor up top, I'm sure they're going to want water access up there as well.
Seems a little excessive just for an office area. So maybe it's a bit more to do with infrastructure as well.
By fire sprinklers and all of that sort of stuff, they probably need dedicated lines for those, I'm guessing.
It could have something to do with that. That's a possibility. It's sort of in the right area as well to connect over at Sanchez into the fire system. I'm just wondering the regs as far as the fire system, whether it needs to be particular coloured pipes or a particular type of plumbing. But that's a good speculation, thanks. The crane, the construction elevator has been removed. We saw that getting removed slightly through the week. I wonder how long this scaffold would last if we compare it to the scaffolding that has still not been removed after quite some time over here on Mega Bay 1. I sort of speculate that this may be left here to allow some larger office equipment to come in through the wall here rather than trying to get it up the elevators.
That, and if they have any small scissor lifts, any of that equipment, because we have been seeing them work at night. You can definitely see the lights on if there's any shots up there.
Okay, let's go on to the factory. So they've got framework coming all the way over to the original Star Factory 1. And we can see the doorway for Star Factory 1 is here in this third section. So it lines up with the doorway here on the ground. So I expect to see another doorway here. That's good to see the steelwork coming along. I can almost see in this photo the framework up against the old building. Let's try this photo, I'll show that better.
Yeah, it definitely seems they've started focusing on the exterior walls a little more and started going quicker on those than doing just one section at a time.
So for the main posts and main beams, there's literally only this little section here to finish off. Like another half a dozen beams or dozen beams to go, and some of the roof beams to go, and we'll have come full circle. Still got a lot of roofing has happened since last week, including the angled section and sections in here. Where last week we could see through here, we could see the bridge cranes in through here. So it's getting quite close to being finalised as far as the roofing and framing goes. Try and find it. There's a photo somewhere we can see the glass being installed on the front of the building here. I'll have to come back to that. The cladding is continuing on the front. The photos always disappear on me.
Pretty
Yeah, it
impressive
looks
how
like
quickly this building is kind of taking shape. Granted, it's pretty much just the exoskeleton, but it seems like in just a couple of weeks' time, it's like doubled in size from aerial photos because they've actually got a roof on it.
Yeah, it looks much bigger with the roof being filled in for sure.
yeah, it definitely dwarfs everything in the area.
Here we go. Thanks for your patience. This corner, a little bit of glass work on this side has started. And I think now it's actually come along a bit further. We could see in one of the ground-based cameras from La Padra, I think. So they're getting the Z-girts for the rest of the exterior wall coming along nicely and filling in the girders up top for the steel work, for the steel roofing. We're not sure, we're speculating whether they're going to remove some of this walling on part of Star Factory 1 or not. I guess once they put the roof on, we'll never know, will we?
Yeah, the only way we know is if we see containers of material leaving the doors.
That's a good point. Okay, we'll move on to the back of the Star Factory here, and we see more excavation in this little area with similar plumbing to what we saw over at Sanchez once again, and rising up in a similar kind of manifold. Our question earlier was, did they do horizontal boring? I believe they did continue the horizontal boring all the way through to here, and even further. There was horizontal borer over here a couple of months ago. We noticed bringing more of that plumbing across into the village as well. So perhaps it is the whole water system for different parts of the factory that needs water. Or once again, could even be some of that commodity still. Not sure if these are high pressure, enough good lines for high pressure gas or not. Maybe that this will be eliminated and it'll all come from that commodities farm over in Sanchez. Still not sure about all that. And it doesn't seem to be any more work, a new slab perhaps, on this new section in here that we saw a lot of electrical conduits come across to. So we expect to see something in this area as well.
Wonder if they maybe put some of those Tesla packs there, maybe for kind of backup power.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that I think we're going to see more and more of the Tesla power packs show up.
Well, it looks like they put down a new bit of concrete and straight away dug a hole in it. Sounds like SpaceX, doesn't it? Okay, let's move on to the new office building. We can see some of the steel sheeting being spread out to lay the concrete onto for the floors. And they seem to miss a floor here or there, though the steel is staged but not spread out. A couple of things to note is these openings being left for some kind of cathedral ceiling. We notice this one has gone from a triangle shape on the floor below as a triangle shape, and on the floor above here it's more of a parallelogram shape. So some very interesting, that one. Some very interesting architecture, artistic work going on here. On this left-hand side, this is a good thing about show and tell. We do these show and tells, and so many people run their eyes over these photos. We see things like little details, like this edge here seems to be pyramided. So it looks like this edge is going to be perhaps sloped, just to add another different angle to the whole factory, the whole office building, I mean.
Yeah, it would not surprise me if the office building mirrors the Star Factory in some way in design.
The foundations over at this side seems to be complete, so we should see some framework going up there over the next couple of weeks. Looking for the test articles over in this area. Well, we found them. We found the last one, all scrapped. This is the section we saw that had the new payload bay door marked into it. So I'm not sure what's going on with that article. That's like a ring watcher's question. What's going on there?
Really just a pathfinder for maybe some new equipment that they commissioned and they needed to maybe test, tolerances or whatever. So it's probably just kind of a minimal product for inspections and maybe corrections.
Testing new welding equipment, a new, say, laser cutting, not laser, some sort of cutting equipment. And there's another ring over here being scrapped as well. Before leaving the office building, it looks like there's some kind of work going on in this block, whether it's the actual owner or whether there's actually some kind of work going on in here. We see this machine inside here on some of the photos, and some work over here, and some drainage coming right up to the block. So either they have this block or they're prepared to receive this block in the very near future, which will be good to see finally. Okay, so there's nice development going on with that whole office building. It must be like a great big Meccano set, erector set. I can imagine every single one of these pieces of steel have numbers on it, like a big IKEA instruction set somewhere. The whole part A goes to part B, etc. We have some drainage work going on in San Martin Drive, is it?
Yes.
and some curb. Now, sorry to zoom in and out here, onions. Which photo? This photo. On the side of the roads, we noticed in the gutters, I can't see one now, there's drains where water goes down from the curb into the drainage. They use these things here to go up on top, so that's the curbing and the drain. That should fit into this drainage here. I think I got that right. That's how it's explained to me in show and tell. So there's drainage all the way along this road going in, which should tie in with maybe some of the drainage up the front here. It seems excessive just for one road, so perhaps some of the drainage off the other streets, are coming in, and perhaps the stormwater off this building has to come into there as well. Plus perhaps some of the drainage at the front of the building, the front of the site along here.
Yeah, you would definitely want a lot of those along any sidewalk, roadside for drainage. Especially with the kind of rain that the whole Boca Chica Starbase area does tend to get. When it does rain, that is a lot of water that needs to be moved.
Yeah, they definitely get some heavy duty deluges, rain deluges here, being a tropical sort of area. Let's move on to the village now. This rear wall has taken an interesting turn in that it looks like there's a raised walkway or some kind of concrete walkway that even cantilevers over the top of the wall. So perhaps a wall section, and on top perhaps a walkway or a bike path. It should end up roughly at grade level. So it's different to the whole rest of the wall system we've seen. It seems to come from over here in a similar fashion.
Yeah, it would definitely make sense to have some sort of walkway / bike path that goes behind the whole village, so you're not having to cut through the village, especially for the workers or families wanting to be safe and not have to worry about traffic.
Yeah, it's
Thinking that
quite
might be more
yeah.
of a storm surge protection with that kind of flat part on top. If the water level rises and there's waves that come crashing in, that would kind of deflect the wave back out, versus having it kind of pour over the top of the wall and then into the yard. So I'm wondering if that's more of a stormwater thing. If that is a raised pathway, then they're going to put a railing along the entire thing. Otherwise, people are going to fall off. So I guess we'll just have to wait to see if they put a railing.
That's a good thought as well. The only reason I go along with the pathway is the wall everywhere else where there isn't residences, it's just a wall. Whereas now all of a sudden where there are residences, it's changed to this type of construction. So perhaps a bit of both.
It might be a code thing for stormwater as well that just applies differently in different areas.
Absolutely. Now we have paperwork has been spotted for a new recreation centre and multi-million-dollar sushi restaurant in this area. So we've noticed it's been cleared over the last few weeks in getting ready for that. That must be a pretty flash sushi restaurant. Just have a quick look at the old solar farm area. It's much the same. A fleet of vacuum trucks. I thought they were concrete trucks. That's much the same in that area. We're always interested in seeing this little strip of land where all the dirt was stored, and there's obviously a huge lack of soil here, which we believe is at the launch site. Okay, with that, think we can go to questions. Joe, thank you for the build site. Go ahead, Darth.
I was just going to say, we're about to see where that went here in just a minute.
Yeah. Okay, Joe, thank you for some questions and donations.
Sure thing. Michael Alder asking, do we know what they're doing with Ship 26? Any speculation?
Oh, the age-old question. No, I haven't seen any speculations through the chats. I do. There's about 100 different speculations. Whether it's going to fly or not is one speculation. Whether it's just being used for testing out more production methods, or we're not sure. I think maybe if it flies, it may have something to do with perhaps some propellant tank test flight. But personally, I'm not sure whether it can. I know that it's going to fly or not. To fly, I think, is it right, Ryan? They need to expose the lower stabilization points.
Yeah, I think a big indication that it's probably not going to fly is that the lower stabilization points have been covered up with stringers that they've added on the outside. So um, while they could possibly still lift it with the tower, it doesn't have those lower points, which are pretty important for kind of twisting and angling the ship to actually stack it on top of a booster. So I think the conversation about it flying pretty much ends with that. I kind of feel like it was maybe going to be a test article, which is why they were kind of rapidly working on it for a little while. But it seems that the architecture for Starship is going to be changing, relatively rapidly. So at this point, I kind of feel like it's an outdated design that they're probably not going to test. But of course, now that I've said that, next week they'll probably roll it somewhere and do testing. But I think it's probably just going to get scrapped and it won't be used for anything.
Yeah, I can see it either getting scrapped or maybe B being the first test article on the new structural stand at Massey's.
Yeah, I'm kind of waiting to see how tall that stand ends up to see if they can maybe cut off the payload section and throw it in there as kind of a commissioning article. Maybe crush the nose cone. We'll have to see how tall that stand ends up being.
And it still has engines, so that's kind of helps the speculation it may fly still. Thanks, Joe.
All right. I'm going to combine two questions here. One from Liam Donald. Where will the new Mega Bay go to account for larger V3 boosters? And along the same lines, John T., do we think Stargate and Launch Control will move to the new office building, allowing for another Mega Bay to be built?
I think common suggestion when people talk about Stargate is Stargate is technically not owned by SpaceX. They lease it, so they would have to first purchase the property and then they can do whatever they want with it. As far as putting a Mega Bay where Stargate is, I don't necessarily think they would do that. If anything, they would probably demolish the high bay and put one there, just because of the shape of the factory and where the doors are. It doesn't exactly indicate that they would bring stuff out and then bring it down toward the road and in. I mean, they still could, but I feel like they may, if they want to go that far, they're probably going to take out the high bay and maybe build a ultra bay or something. But I think V3 Starship is still a ways off. I don't think it's on the horizon for 2 years from now. I think we're probably looking a little bit further out than that. So as far as the infrastructure goes, I mean, they can throw up a mega bay in relatively little time compared to how quickly we're probably going to end up seeing V3. I think it's still a ways out.
Yeah, on that note, I would say I can see the high bay being torn down for a payload processing facility of some sort, a vertical integration facility for payloads. But for V3, I really don't think we're going to see those start coming out of Starbase. I think we're going to see those coming out of Florida before they come out of Starbase.
Yeah, I was just going to add that as well. I think if anything, we probably see V2 ramp up at Starbase with the current infrastructure. They kind of work out all of the efficiency issues with the production line and everything there, and then they take those lessons learned to Florida, and then they build Florida with V3, right from the get-go, or at least build the buildings capable of doing V3. Whether they jump straight to V3 or they produce V2 and then switch over to V3, that remains to be seen. But I think Florida will really be where the infrastructure starts, and maybe they bring that infrastructure to Starbase, but we'll have to wait to see.
Now,
Yeah,
didn't we
agree.
work out that booster version 3 without the hot stage ring can still fit in Mega Bay 1? And the
No,
toilet,
it won't.
no. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it won't be able to, unfortunately. I think even the V2, well, it's kind of confusing because the V2 is slightly taller, but I think V2 can still come out. Whether they can do it with the hot staging ring kind of remains to be seen. We really need some more measurements on things, but I think V2 can technically be built in all of the current infrastructure they currently have.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe.
Excellent. Another question.
There was two parts to that question. What was the other part to that question?
I do believe we covered it.
Thanks.
I've since deleted them. So another question from Liam Donald. What's the box on top of the nose cone hall part of the new Star Factory?
Box on top. I'm struggling to work out what they mean. Sorry.
I think maybe the angled part at the front, looks like is that like an AC or what is that?
Oh, gotcha. Thank you. They're the insulation. Is that a pack of insulation?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that's like a palette of the insulation. Yeah.
There you
Well,
go.
that covers that. Andy Alder, question: one pipe for sewage and one for rainwater. Is that a question or a statement?
I think they mean on San Martin Drive there.
I believe so. That was about when the question came in.
Well, I'm not sure. Possibly, but it all seems to. That is a good possibility. I don't know.
And on a related note, missing tools, is there any sewage treatment or septic tank in field?
That was actually my next question about that previous question. Is there, as far as I know, most of the sewage here goes into blackwater tanks and gets removed from the site. We see them over here behind Stargate here. There's this amenities block doesn't have sewage processing. It just goes into blackwater tanks and is transported off site, as far as I know.
All right, last question for this segment. Liam Donald asks, does SpaceX rent the properties to their employees, or are they a part of their compensation packages?
I'm not sure about that. I don't know anybody knows that, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm not
Unless
sure.
somebody, yeah, you'd have to ask an employee. And I'm not sure, because you can't say generally companies do this and generally companies do that, because SpaceX doesn't always do what other companies generally do they? They seem to have their own sort of way of doing business. So that's a very good question. And no, we don't really know the answer to that.
I imagine there is probably some sort of an incentive now that they've built a lot of these houses in the village for workers that are coming in. It kind of depends on probably the job position, whether they're offered something at maybe a discounted price or something. Not entirely sure, but I would imagine that there is some sort of an incentive to pull in certain employees.
All right, I'm clear. I think we can move on to launch site.
Let's just do that then. Okay, we'll start with some pictures. We'll start over at the suborbital site. Before we go to the actual tower area, there's an interesting development going on here in the wetlands. Now, we're speculating whether it's an access road or it's going to be, this is excavated simply for this barrier here. Maybe they've got a temporary clearance to put an access road. This is the very edge of their property here. The SpaceX actually own this bit of property, but they haven't got the Army Corps of Engineering permission to fill this wetland in yet. But they may have permission to put a temporary road in here, which means this wall is in the way. But you know what happens to walls or concrete when it gets in the way at SpaceX, don't you? It gets demolished. So they may knock a bit of wall down here for access. It may just be for that silt fence. We're really not sure.
Yeah, personally, I think it's just for the silt fence. I don't see them taking any equipment back there. The likelihood of most equipment getting stuck is probably pretty high.
We do notice the wick drain system. Originally, I think we speculated might collect in a pipe around the perimeter here, but instead it seems to just come out underneath the wall here. And that seems to be where the wick system is draining. So this silt barrier here would help contain any sediment coming out. And perhaps, yeah, another backup system of silt fencing along here, silt barrier.
Yeah, I'm guessing because you can see the gravel where the exits for that pipe is there along the wall. So I'm guessing that was kind of the initial phase, as they thought the gravel would be able to filter it out. But given the timing of things happening here with the backfill and everything else, I'm guessing that they were maybe told that there's too much coming out, so they're putting in another silt fence.
So these are possibly the ones from the original. There's a wick drainage system under the original mound of dirt we saw in 2018. I wonder if these are the exits for those, or whether these are part of the whole new system. I don't remember seeing them previously.
They may also funnel the water from that concrete toward the wall, and there might be some drains along the wall that just go down and dump on the other side of it.
Yep. So earthworks continue. We saw, I'm not sure it shows in here, this pile of dirt is a lot higher than what it looks. And they've been, at one stage they were moving dirt from one side to the other. Perhaps that was just filling in the strip of land through here. But yeah, lots and lots of dirt arriving on site.
Yeah, you can definitely tell that strip has been raised severely compared to last flyover.
That's good to see work continuing on that side of the launch site. We did see that they had excavated some fundag from underneath test pad B, and it seems to be boxed off, ready to be filled in again. And just while we're here, I was mentioning earlier that this stand only has the supports where the clamps are. We can see here how the pieces are missing in between the clamps here, which we see now on the new static fire stand and the ship cryo testing stand.
Yeah, I think the replacement of that fondag is a pretty good indicator that Ship 30 will probably come out here. I'm going to guess probably within the next 2 weeks, and maybe do some testing before, probably before even Flight 4. They might test it to get it out of the way. Seems like that's kind of what they like to do. They like to test the ship and get it back to the build site and kind of get it flight ready, and then roll the booster out and do the booster stuff, and then get ready for a flight. So I would not be surprised if they pull Ship 30 out here to do some testing here in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
It's interesting how we see the different regime as the whole Starship Ground Zero and the Starships themselves develop, and how their testing regimes and their flight ready regimes have changed slightly over the last sort of year or so.
Yeah, and I believe the last time I saw S30, Ship 30 had at least 3 of the 4 flaps strapped down, so it looks like they're getting close to moving it soon.
Well, that's always a good thing. I think we saw a trench here last time. It's all filled in. Not even a sign it was even there.
Interesting. Do we
Yeah,
know what that hardware is right there?
Yeah, it tripped us up last time. There was some hardware here to do with the what was that? That was to do with the launch OLM. Let me see. There's another angle. No.
Very
We didn't have-
interesting shape. Looks like a giant brake disc, but I'm not sure what they'd use that for.
Have to keep an eye on that in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, because that kind of reminds me of what I would expect the clamp shielding to look like.
There's a few circle pieces here, and maybe a T piece.
The
And also-
linkage.
Oh, go on.
Yeah, I was clarifying the linkage shielding for the middle of the linkage that we'll be seeing here in a minute.
Yeah.
That's far too big for that. That almost looks like a plug for maybe a large pipe, but I guess I'm struggling to think of anything that big that would require a plug like that.
Okay, let's move on to the tank farm, which is looking very finished off. I think just today or yesterday, we saw venting from this LOX tank too. So it looks like all nitrogen tanks are vented, so they're more than likely filled, and it seems like they're filling the LOX tanks as well now. There's a very good chance that these tanks will be online for Flight 4, at least the nitrogen side, of course, because they're moving a nitrogen tank. At least the nitrogen side seems to be very much online, with the fittings here being fitted off. This is where the liquid nitrogen enters the methane side, and it still has the ability to go into the pumps, although because I don't do cryo testing here anymore, I don't know there's any need to run nitrogen through the pumps, but it seems like they still have that ability. But obviously mostly this nitrogen is used in the tank farms for in the bottom of the hippos to chill the methane and the LOX on the LOX side. There's a few of us have worked out this pipe brings some high pressure nitrogen to backfill the nitrogen tanks, and it raises speculation as to what the vaporizers underneath these tanks are for. Perhaps they haven't commissioned these vaporizers, or perhaps those vaporizers are for something else. So I haven't quite worked out the nitrogen side yet, but we're pretty sure the LOX side to backfill the tanks is to do with this system of the new vertical tanks and vaporizers here, which should be perhaps that line behind there. Doesn't seem to go anywhere except just here.
Well, I admit I was pretty surprised when they put the vaporizers under those tanks. I was thinking that maybe they only did that to protect them for a launch, but they've since really blocked them in, so I don't think those are leaving.
So all the LOX tanks have been connected to the main delivery line, except one. There's always one. So this is the main delivery to the LOX pumps over at the LOX tank farm, ready to load the ship. And of course we have the main liquid nitrogen line through here, one for the LOX side and one for the methane side, as we saw in the previous photo. So there's the line for the methane side, and then the line for the liquid nitrogen to go to the LOX hippos. And while we're on this photo, I think we see the LOX, the main delivery line, is only missing a couple of pieces here, and it seems to have its T-piece installed in here, which we saw getting ready last week. So right now the LOX, perhaps the vertical tanks are back online. Not quite the new horizontal LOX tanks. But it's all getting very, very close to being finalised. Of course, there's the big... go on.
I was just going to say, yeah, it looks like they're going to have access to both systems by the next launch, but I really think it's all going to be, all the verticals will be gone by Flight 5.
By Flight 5. Yeah, it's looking that way, especially since they're decommissioning half of the whole liquid nitrogen system here. I didn't notice before they covered all the infrastructure here while they're cutting this tank up. It was interesting how they removed this tank by doing a staggered cut here to counterbalance the exoskeleton on one side so that the tank would lift up straight. And I guess they're going to take the back half off next, which we noticed they changed the load spreader to a straight bar load spreader, and they're currently taking the back half of that tank off. I haven't looked in the last 12 hours whether they've actually lifted it out yet or not.
They were still working.
Oh, go ahead, Darth.
I was just saying they were still working on the that section before we started the show, the dome section.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm pretty surprised. I think this is a case of, one team doing one thing and one team kind of doing another. But the fact that they did put that, the exoskeleton on those two tanks was, seemed like it was a fairly permanent, kind of a a long-lasting solution to something that they think might have been a problem, because the tanks that were in front of those two, got dented by debris and shock waves from the first flight. And it is kind of an interesting turn of events that, those tanks lasted one flight and then they decided to get rid of them. So I think it was an interesting utilization of resources and time to, put up that skeleton, when I think those tanks probably would have made it through another flight just fine without anything on them. But yeah, pretty interesting. Probably, different decisions and, a change of how they were going to go about doing this.
Agreed. I think they were planning on having them longer, but plans changed.
The late breaking news, they dug up a bunch of the drains. What does that mean in this area? I'm not sure what that means. That's coming in from Patreon Lounge chat. And also, Ryan, they modified those vaporizers underneath before dragging them under the tanks. The wicks. I'll come back to that. I'm not sure what that means. Okay, back onto the tank farm on this side. It's quite impressive, actually, them cutting those tanks up like that. When they're cutting it, they cut it around the top, and as they were doing it in chat, we were saying, so how are they going to remove the bottom half of the tank? Are they going to cut this tank in half first and then lift it out and create new mounting points for the load spreader? But no, they're just going to take this section out. And when they started cutting down, the chat was quite alive with, what are they doing now? And it was worked out quite quickly that it was to do with counterbalancing the exoskeleton. So moving on, the water tanks here have had their nice shiny, they're looking nice and sort of 50s style, nice and shiny and well protected. And the plumbing on these vertical tanks is continuing. So that's looking like it's getting close to being finalised. So we have water. There's something that came up recently is there is a furnace system here that can heat water. So perhaps they were adding heat to these water tanks as well to increase their thermal, the heat bank, basically, the thermal ability to chill, to vaporize the cryo fluids in the bunker here.
I was actually just going to ask that question as to why the water, because the water tanks are teed into the water line, so they're clearly for water. I was going to ask why they actually put insulation on it, because traditionally with the original setup, they were just um, they were relying on the natural thermal transfer of energy to keep the water kind of at room temperature, and the overall quantity they had was enough so that as they're piping it through that system, that the cold cryopropellant isn't going to cool the water down to a point where it essentially freezes. They had enough of it that they were able to exchange that, but it looks like with this system, because they're getting rid of the other water tanks. So unless they're storing water somewhere else that I'm unaware of, it looks like those three small tanks are all that they have now. Um, so it's possible that they were trying to, well, because they were working with, somewhat limited water capacity to begin with, because they didn't have as many tanks as I think they wanted, but um, they may be heating the water now. That might be why um, there's some insulation, because they're decreasing the capacity even more, so that water is going to have a tendency to cool down a lot more as it cycles through the system. So it's possible that now they're trying to add additional thermal capacity on top of that by trying to warm that water, because you wouldn't want to put insulation on these water tanks if you're still trying to have the air in contact with the metal to actually warm that water back up. Now you're basically insulating it, so you're making a fridge. So it seems like they're trying to keep heat inside, possibly keep it at a higher temperature, maybe pump the water at a lower flow rate since it's actually going to be warmer. But yeah, it does kind of seem like they're maybe introducing heat into the system, and they're trying to keep it inside of those tanks, which is a complete 180 from how the system worked prior.
I have
And if I were
go on.
to say, and if I'm correct, that also helps supply the detonation suppressant system under the OLS.
It's
I have it on.
possible. I think there were some additional water lines that ran, I think, over to the tank by the comms bunker. So I'm wondering if they're maybe pulling water from that instead, because they did pull some lines across, kind of where your cursor is, Stephanie, up there at the top of the. They did pull some lines across over there. So I'm wondering if they're maybe pulling water from a different location for that now. So that would be different than before, probably.
Yeah, the heaters have been here for some time, and AH is saying that they're in these containers here. They've been here for over a year. Just going on the heaters. Thank you, AH. Okay, we should move on to finish the show up with the launch mount here. And work continues inside. We can see, this photo shows a better run, that the new linkage is being put in place here. There's lots of them. So going on that, I'll get you to, we've got permission again. I've lost the photo. To show, hang on, I'll come back to it. So the new linkages have these new parts added onto them here. Would you like to go on with that?
Yeah, so if we can get that image from Starship Gazer here, I can kind of talk about that new part while you're looking. But it appears that SpaceX is swapping out all of the upper linkages that kind of constrain the motion for these arms. I mean, I call them the load arms because they take the load of the vehicles and transfer it into the launch ring. But there's a couple changes with these new arms or linkages that it appears there's kind of some darker objects there in the center below that kind of silver disc there at the top. But it appears that those are for adding some additional weight to the arms, since those are actually going to drop down when the arm folds back. It looks like they might be having some issues with getting. There we go. So it looks like they might be having some issues getting the arms to kind of their initial motion to kind of pull downwards at that center pivot point or bearing. So they've added some additional metal to that area, and it's kind of interestingly shaped to kind of work around all of the other constraints that they've got. So that's the first kind of big obvious change for these parts here is the addition of the weights there. Something else that we kind of got into in show and tell last night was the actual disc that is covering the bearing there in the middle is much larger than what they originally had on the linkages when they installed them, way back. And we actually learned that they must have retrofitted these at some point because the linkage arms that were back in Sanchez, actually, you can actually see that they have a larger marking on them, which implies that they had a larger kind of disc piece that was covering part of the linkage. So it appears that SpaceX retrofitted them. Now, the purpose of those appears to actually cover the bearing there in the middle. They may be trying to decrease the amount of heat that actually gets to the bearings. We've seen some of the linkages that they've pulled out are fairly damaged on the bearings, but it's unsure if that is due to the heat exposure from launch, or if they had to kind of beat on them in order to get them out. So the fact that they've kind of changed the covering kind of implies that maybe there's some thermal issues that they're running into at that location or that specific bearing location. So we have that. And then the actual shape of kind of the left side linkage here that Stephanie was kind of hovering over is a little bit different from before. But the biggest change, I guess, on the far side is actually the little tab there that Stephanie had the cursor on. So we kind of went back and forth on this in show and tell last night, and we believe that is actually essentially a stop. Now, the original arms had these as well, but they were actually built into the linkage. They weren't like a separate piece that can be essentially serviced, because it looks like there's two little bolts in the bottom of that kind of thread up through into that. I'm assuming it's a different type of material, whether it's like a brass or maybe an aluminum. Not quite sure, but that piece appears to be something that catches on some hardware that's kind of mounted on the roof inside of the OLM. So when the arms fold back fairly rapidly into the launch mount, those are going to have to catch on something to kind of slow those arms down as they retract back into the launch mount. So if you go back to that first picture, Stephanie, of the arms, yeah, that one, you can actually see, if you zoom in, right there is where that piece is. And then as the arms would close, that obviously rotates up and presumably catches on something. The original arms or the linkages had that built into them, so it's possible that being a consumable component, it's essentially a wear point, that could be one of the reasons why they may have decided to switch over to these linkages instead. It's likely that it's a combination of design decisions as to why they've made this switch right now. But looks like they're trying to optimize the system. It's one thing that they're learning a lot with each launch, because you're not getting the same thermal loads during static fires as you will with full launches. So this kind of shows that piece again up there without the launch mount kind of surrounding it. So they really only get to test these sort of components in launch conditions, and they've only had 3 launches so far. So they're learning quite a bit, especially as the system, as it takes off quicker, they've got to retract the arms quicker. All sorts of different optimizations they're making. It's going to expose some areas where they need to make improvements.
And these renders here are hot off the press, and you're seeing them here first on the live stream today. Thank you, Ryan. You did this in my overnight. And you were saying the shape of these is cut out to perhaps fit into some of the internal plumbing here as well, so they don't prang.
Yeah, the plumbing in this render is pretty it's really hard to see, what's inside of this ring because we never really got good photos. But it's possible that the shape of those could be to um, kind of work around some existing infrastructure as they've run new pipes and reconfigured things within the mount. It's possible that as they retract that they need to have some clearance on some components. So it's also a way to get as much weight in the right place as possible to kind of um, influence this to bend and move in a specific way.
Okay, we'll finish off the launch mount with, I believe you have some ideas on what the new shape of the BQ hood has got to do with.
Yeah, so I guess we've seen the new booster hood kind of laying around in previous flyovers, kind of laying upright, and I think the most notable thing is that it has a bump out on the front of it, which is kind of interesting because it's quite square. And I know a lot of people were suggesting that it's to kind of add strength to the front of the hood, or because we did have some heating on the original one that kind of warped the steel. Um, but if you look at some other photos, particularly when they were kind of opening and closing the hood, you can actually see some additional hardware that's up inside the hood, particularly in that spot. And from what I can tell, it looks as if there's some linkages and stuff up there too, which indicates that there's something that's moving. And it appears that they're actually implementing a essentially a seal like they have on the ship QD, that when that the door closes on the ship QD, it has some black like seal plugs that cover the ports on the actual QD face itself, and it appears as if they've actually built that into the hood itself. I believe the first version of the hood may have had a retrofit that added this to the system. I don't have that modeled here. I wasn't able to get that done in time, but this is a cross section kind of showing where that new bump out is in relation to the QD when it's retracted. Um, but if you can imagine some sort of a plug that kind of at the last second as the hood closes, it would kind of push out and cover the face of those ports. That's kind of what it appears like they're doing. I know there are several images that show kind of some circular plugs that could actually interface with the front of that QD. So it seems as though SpaceX is making optimizations inside that hood, since it seems kind of inevitable that they're getting a lot of hot gas inside the hood. So they're just trying to seal some stuff up because any little debris that they get in the hoses is definitely going to require a lot of clean out between launches. So they're just making some optimizations. So I don't think it's necessarily for strength. I mean, the geometry will kind of add some additional strength, but I don't believe that's the main purpose of it. I think that it's mainly to allow for that sealing mechanism to reside in there with a little bit more space than the retrofit did.
Awesome. You heard it here. You heard it here first on RGV Live. Thank you, Ryan, so much for your work on all that over the last sort of 24 to 48 hours. We'll finish the launch site now with the new amenities building, and it looks like we've got a transformer station here, I guess, being built here with a concrete wall to protect it. And we see some concrete being poured and some rebar ready for some more concrete around the edge. Another thing to note here is they're doing some work on the carbon dioxide tank here, which could just be insulation or what have you from the actual launching. We're running short on time, so we might go to questions, Joe, please, and final donations.
All right. Yeah, I want to thank Smurf Trooper for gifting a membership. And Cinti wants to wrap his head around the plumbing of the new tanks. Have they been fully plumbed in yet?
We mentioned in the stream, yeah, they're getting very close. There's only a few pieces of pipe here and there this whole vaporizer system still needs a little bit of plumbing, and there was that little bit of plumbing on the main LOX line over at this end. But all the tie-ins for the nitrogen and oxygen all seem very much complete. It's like maybe 99% there. There's not much left to go at all. And in fact, I'm still guessing that this system will be online for Flight 4, sorry.
Yeah, I definitely expect all this plumbing to be done within the next week or so.
Agreed. All right. And a question from Liam Donald, who was gifted the membership by Smurf Trooper. Do we think that the section that's being graded for Launchpad 2 will be raised to the same height or grade as Static Fire Stand A, Test Stand A?
That's a good question. They're either going to build this up to this grade or they're going to cut all this down and make a new grade. I mean, you can kind of expect to see this berm disappear and a new berm like what's on the current orbital farm. I mean, they need a berm this way, don't they? So there's going to be some major work going on here. I can see them knocking this down and maybe creating a new level, perhaps, overall. It's a good question.
For sure. And on a similar related note, Booster 4's Gridfin asks, will the dirt path be a road for SPMT when transporting ships and boosters to Orbital Pad B?
This new road, I'm not sure.
I don't think so. I think, which we kind of talked about this before the show, Stephanie, with the new entrance and kind of reconfiguring that area. I think they're probably going to use the same entrance for Orbital Pad B. I have a pretty strong feeling that they're going to move the entrance a little bit toward Starhopper. Because they needed the ramp there in order to get the vehicles up to Pad A because of how high the grade was. So I don't think they're actually going to build up the grade. They're probably going to get rid of that ramp. That way they can move the entrance a little bit toward Starhopper. Now the tank farm may be up a little bit higher because I know the suborbital side does get a little higher in general over here. But I think that the actual pad for the orbital pad B is going to kind of remain at the same height that that suborbital stand B is at. They're just going to kind of level all that out, I think, over there.
They may build it up a little bit in the interim to help with the drainage system. It may get higher, like they did here, and create a pile of dirt to help with the drainage for a short term, and then put it back down again. So I wouldn't take, I wouldn't read too much into the height of this dirt in the short term, because like I say, they may use it for hydrostatic weight to help with the drainage system. Thanks,
Yeah,
Joe.
we really need to wait for foundations to begin, and that kind of gives us our indication of what height the ground is going to be.
Agreed. I want to thank Coco Cats for gifting a membership, and Daniel Hogben has a question or wants confirmation. So the first 4 horizontal tanks are LN2 and the rest are for LOX. Is that correct?
Yes, there's 4 new nitrogen tanks and 5 new LOX tanks. For a long time, we weren't sure what this eyebrow tank was for, but it's we know that it's been plumbed in. We can tell this, by the way, the delivery pipes are just not the best image, but the way the delivery pipes get fed into the main lines here. So yeah, 4 nitrogen and 5 LOX, and that these horizontal tanks exceed the capacity of the vertical tanks by a little bit or a lot. I can't remember, but they do. There's more cryoliquids here than in those 5 tanks. I mean, yeah, those 5 tanks, yeah.
Sounds good. Question from Liam Donald. What shielding are they putting around the hot dog tank's piping? A bunch of piping got destroyed in the last launch.
What got destroyed in the last launch was a piece of cable tray here. I can't remember any actual plumbing that got destroyed on this side on the last launch. Can you remember, Brian?
I remember the cable tray had something done to it. I'm not sure if it. I think it might have blown with the the wind gusts. And maybe it wasn't fastened and it got all twisted. I can't remember if it got hit by something or if it just got twisted up. But I don't remember any plumbing getting damaged. But I mean, it's while they were, this is a evolving, work site, so it's entirely possible that something wasn't clamped down during the last launch that ended up, getting kicked up. So I wouldn't say that, it necessarily needs to be protected. I think it's possible it could just need to be attached correctly.
Yeah, I
Okay.
believe it was just the cable tray that got twisted from the pressure wave right there near where it goes down to the comm hut in front of the horizontal tanks.
Yeah, just in here somewhere.
All right, last question from Jeff S. Jones. How do you think SpaceX will get enough propellant to launch one flight per day? With a winky smiley face.
That's a good question. It's a question I've always had all the way along when I heard about the cadence. That obviously something will change. That in time, the one launch a day, I don't believe is going to be from a single site or one launch an hour. I think that'll be over multiple sites. Like for Artemis and that, they may be launches from multiple sites, like here, Kennedy, possibly, hopefully Australia, and other launch sites around the world, I think, are in the pipeline. And yeah, it does seem to be a logistical nightmare trying to get propellants here. That's a very good question. Thank you.
Yeah, they would essentially need a pipeline to supply. They'd have to have a whole setup in order to actually reach that cadence. I think that cadence is still a long way off. If even getting down to one Starship a month, that's a pretty big. I mean, that's a pretty big feat if you really think about it. I mean, even if they get down to multiple per month, say two or three, given the launch capability, I just don't know. I mean, it'd have to be Starlinks at that point because I don't think there's really enough in the commercial market to really utilize that much launching right now. So I do think the one launch a day cadence is still a pretty far off. Um, the it's going to have to come around to a time where they really need that many. I feel like.
Yeah, all I can say is we got to keep looking out at what happens at Pad B here at this launch site and what's going on at 39A at KSC to see what the future is going to look like.
Yeah, they're still definitely in kind of the beta test mode of Starship launch pads. They're learning a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if in 10 years they've completely reconfigured this tank farm and this launch site to maybe even Starship version 4. So nothing at Starbase is fairly permanent except for possibly footings that go really far on the ground. Otherwise, a lot of stuff can really be utilized in different ways. They can reconfigure. I mean, they tear up concrete every day pretty much. So there's a lot that can be reconfigured. It really just comes down to figuring out, how better to do it because you don't want to waste your time, tearing something out if it's not worth doing. So they're gaining a lot of information, a lot of data, making decisions based off of that. And I think that, Pad B here is going to look pretty significantly different than Pad A. And I think, 39A will probably take those changes into account, and by the time they end up with multiple towers at and multiple launch sites throughout Florida and whatnot, they're probably going to look a lot different as well.
All
Thanks,
right,
Joe.
yeah, totally agreed. We are clear to end the show.
Okay, well, I'll thank Darth Firth for joining us today. This is your first live stream, and well done. You did very, very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Team RGV and Stephanie and Ryan and Joe. And thank you to everybody watching today.
And Ryan, thank you always for your very expert input. Thank you. We learn a lot from you every time we talk to you, Ryan. Thank you. And we'll say goodbye to you too, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always fun. A lot of cool photos to go through, and every week there's a significant change in various projects here. So it's pretty fresh and exciting to see all these changes and continue to look forward to all the developments that'll happen here over the next year or more.
Late breaking news. Dirt was dug out of here and moved around. We saw all the trucks and excavators. And with that, I'll say goodbye as well. And thank you, chat, and everyone for joining today. And thank you. I'll leave Jay to do all the final thank yous and sign off. Thanks, Jay.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie, for hosting. Thanks, Team RGV, for getting these awesome photos for us yesterday. Appreciate you getting, going through the last minute flyovers and dealing with the weather. So thanks and great job. Thanks to Emlyn. Appreciate you turning the knobs and pushing the buttons. Thanks, Ryan and Darth. Appreciate your time and expertise here today. And thanks to Rocket Prophet and Astrogen for moderating the chat. Awesome YouTube chat today, guys. Thanks, all. And to all of our generous donators and gifters, appreciate you. Most engines cut off, hot staging confirmed. Love you, bye.